the role of population of interneurons, the so-called OLM cells, into theta generation. I mean, theta classically is thought to be kind of like generated extra hippocampally in structures that are believed to be theta pacemaker. For example, the medial septum. The medial septum is this region, and we have three major populations of cells, GABAergic, glutamatergic, and cholinergic. And in the 70s, they found that if you remove the septum, you generally get rid of most of the teeth. However, if you do a thing that's called like if you get a whole hippocampus, it's a prep developed by a guy in Canada, like Sylvain Williams, that he removed the whole hippocampus and stick an electrode to it, and this whole hippocampus prep has intrinsic theta rhythm. So this like suggests that the hippocampus alone can have like theta generating circuits. So the hippocampus, I mean, like you have a more or less uniform population of pyramidal cells, but you have a variety of interneurons that can be either classified by their anatomical position or by where they project and so on, or by genetic markers. The cell I'm talking about is this guy here, number 7. That is a cell that's called OLM because it has cell body in the outermost layer, the stratum aureus. And then you have the axon that goes straight to the most distal part of the pyramidal cell, the lacunose molecularis. That's why they are called OLM. And where are they? Yeah, so they express, I mean, if you're going to use genetic markers to identify them, they express parvalbumin in some cases, somatostatin, mGlu1, among other markers. But we add one here, that is the nicotinic receptor alpha 2. And that's how we actually isolate these cells. The role of them in theta is like there are cells that like during theta, they are very phase locked to theta oscillations. Not too much to gamma. And yeah, so, and not too much to like other like repos and things like that. Recently, this paper is from, I don't know, I think 2 months ago. Williams group using the same prep, like removing the whole hippocampus, and using optogenetics, they have parvalbumin Cre and somatostatin Cre. They show that the somatostatin positive interneurons are not important in this theta generation, while PV interneurons, they preferably, like if you simulate with various frequencies, they preferably set the system at a theta range oscillation. It's different from, like this Cardin paper where they find that PV generate gamma. But here in the hippocampus, they found that somatostatin is not contributing to theta. It's this light here. So they tried the same with somatostatin, not much changes. Why the parvalbumin is the important one. So, okay. So this is our marker. So it's a crenate2. We made a mouse. So as I said, the crenate2 is a nicotinic receptor alpha 2. You see, it's very specific. So you have the cell bodies here, or the as OLM cell bodies are supposed to be, and this cloud of tomato, like fluorescent protein here, it's like it matches the axonoplex of these cells. Funnily, there is another crenate2 mouse from GenSat. This is a crenate2 Cre OE25. It's not specific. As you see, it's like you have cells here in the pyramidal layer in CA3, and you have very little expression. I mean, it's not as much as ours, but you do have some in the audience here. But it's very unspecific. So it's not actually, it was some, like luck in the insertion when we made this mouse that generate this specific pattern. So here's another one. Also, you see more here expression in the dorsal hippocampus. Our mice don't show a lot of expression in the dorsal hippocampus. So it's mostly ventral intermediate, and it's mostly CA1. So we have, this is just another picture. See, nothing CA3, just CA1. And this is just like a field cell, just to confirm they have the normal firing pattern of OLM cells and so on. It's better for you to have an idea. So, yeah, so in the dorsal, you don't see much. You don't see many cell bodies. You see projections, but not cell bodies. While like you go more intermediate ventral, they're there. It's another example. That's like with a viral injection. And you see, like we can actually manage to, so this is layer 5 and 6 Martinotti cells. We manage to, so not all the time, but we manage when we inject virus, I just like to really get only the OLM cells without affecting the cortex. The other marker that people use to isolate these cells is the somatostatin. So we actually bought this mouse, the somatostatin Cree mouse from Jackson, and it's very nonspecific. So you see, you have this expression CA3 here in the hilus, and also if you look close, you have a lot of pyramidal cells. Despite the fact that pyramidal cells don't express somatostatin, this the Cree mouse that is mostly used express Cree in a lot of pyramidal cells. You just like a closer view. I mean, you have OLMs, but I mean, the amount of pyramidal cells, I don't know if you can really get conclusion of specificity here, because that's what this Williams guy used for showing that they are not participating in Theta. We sent an opinion just to show, like here, this is somatostatin. You have pyramidal cell firing, you have fast spiking. So, I mean, it's very hard to get any conclusion on that, and that's ours. So, if you go dorsal, ventral, no, dorsal, intermediate, and ventral, we have a very homogeneous kind of response. Previously, I forgot to cite, we published a paper like described this mouse in 2012, and then we also described the circuit that they are in. So we did some voltage imaging to show that the inhibition is really restricted to the distal part of the pyramidal cell. The cells also send collaterals to dendritic inhibiting interneurons. So they have this circuit, they disinhibit the proximal part of the apical dendrite, and they inhibit the distal part of the apical dendrite. And that coincides with the temporoharmonic synapse that come direct from entorhinal cortex to CA1. And also, the disinhibition coincides with the Schaffer collateral. So it kind of, you inhibit, when the OLM cells are active, you inhibit the temporoharmonic pathway and disinhibit the Schaffer. This is like, when we start doing that, because I did my postdoc with in vitro gamma oscillations, so I just like was patching these cells and generating gamma in the slice. So it's a very simple prep. You cut, like you do a horizontal slice, bath your slice with carbachol or kainate, and then you generate this 30 Hz oscillation. And in that case, like if you record from a parvalbumin positive interneuron, you have a very strong phase lock of the gamma with the firing of the PV cells with the gamma. So you see here, it's a very strong phase lock. I mean, that just happened in vitro oscillations. I mean, like the correlation between fast spike firing and gamma during actually real gamma, it's about 20%. So they don't phase lock that much to gamma in real life, but in slice, they do. While our cells, the CNA2, they have very poor phase lock to gamma. And they fire around the theta frequency, even if the whole system is firing to gamma. They're firing gamma. Another thing we found, so like if we put generodopsin in these cells, and then here we bath the slice with carbachol. So what happened is, here I'm like generating subthreshold light pulses. So what you get is like I don't know if I can call this resonance, but yeah, they fire around theta frequency. Even though I am simulated at 16 Hertz, they are firing around 8 here. While the PV, if you simulate 16 Hertz, they fire at 16 Hertz in bursts. So we did also some calcium imaging to see So I generate gamma in a slice, and I want to see if this, the population of OLM, if they are synchronized or in some rhythm. And so what you find is that they like to fire, just like theta range, so that's 4 hertz, and this is like several cells in a slice. So the green ones here are all the interneurons in the stratum audiens that are not tomato positive. And what I did was to electroporate Oregon green with a pipette. So I electroporate just cells in the stratum audiens. And then what you see is that like they fire, even though they slice, the local field potential is in gamma, they fire around like 4 and with a peak at 8. Also, another thing like doing voltage imaging, because when you get to the lacunose molecular, you have a very, it's very disorganized, so you don't get a nice local field potential in there in the slide. So what I did is like to put voltage sensitive dye, bulk load, and when you image the slides during gamma, if you image like the lacunose molecular, you have some, 8 hertz activity, even though the slides in gamma. Then, because, the dendrite of the pyramidal cell, it's very peculiar. Like, since McGee in the late 90s showed that you have a non-homogeneous distribution of IH, so you have more of this hyperpolarizing activated current at the distal dendrite than at the proximal. Then after that, people also show that you have more, like you have non-homogeneous distribution of sodium channels, also non-homogeneous distribution of an MDA receptor. So what you have is the distal dendrite, I think, like to compensate, to be distal, it generates its own current, like to kind of amplify the importance of the distal output. The problem when you have this amplification is that generally you lose the temporal content of your stimuli. So what we're seeing here, I was like putting an electrode in the lacunose molecular and stimulating at various frequencies, so 4 and 16 hertz. So what we found is that if you have, if you don't block an MDA and you stimulate at 4, you do have some amplification, like you have a nice calcium signal. This is the GCAM, by the way. We have a nice calcium signal at the sum of the pyramidal cell by stimulating the temporal harmonic pathway there. Actually, I cannot call that, but yeah, like putting the electrode in the lacunose molecular. So you have a kind of amplification of up to 8 hertz, but then you block an MDA receptors, then you actually get rid of this amplification. And my hypothesis for that is that like this an MDA spikes at the distal dendrite, they can encode some kind of temporal information up to 4 or 8 hertz, not more than that. And that kind of suggests that you may have, the dendrite may have an ability to sustain like different frequencies depending on where these inputs come from. So like if you want a rhythm that like is 4 or 8 hertz, you can actually stimulate the distal dendrite, and this 4 or 8 hertz may arrive to the sum. But if you stimulate your dendrite in higher frequency, you're not going to get this frequency content back to the sum. So what I did like to check to is again generating gamma oscillation in this slice, and then patch like the soma or the proximal dendrite together with the distal dendrite. I didn't have many because these experiments are not so easy to do. But what you have, doing this gamma oscillation, the proximal, this is inverted here, sorry, like this, the green here should be the blue here. But the proximal dendrite, or the soma, has a high, like the membrane potential, has a high coherence to the local field potential gamma, that's in vitro, while the distal dendrite has a much lower coherence. So this is actually the opposite direction, so the distal dendrite don't see this perisomatic gamma. So the hypothesis, you have a perisomatic compartment that could be firing, being influenced by higher frequency components like gamma or whatever. And you have this distal compartment where you have more sodium channels. You may have the generation of NMDA spikes, and you have also more IH. what actually indicate that, this inhibition of OLM cells. In fact, it's not strong evidence, but very often when I do a voltage image with optogenetic of these cells, you do see the distal part of the dendrite. So like I simulate OLM, you see inhibition, but then very often you see like a post-rebound depolarization. So that may indicate that you can even have rebound action potentials followed by OLM inhibition. So yeah. And then this theta band firing would be, like containing the most distal part of the dendrites. Yeah, I mean, like this, the distal degeneration of dendritic action potentials, so-called dendritic, like NMDA spikes or calcium spikes in the dendrite, has been shown in layer 5 pyramidal cells. So, I mean, these like dendritic spikes, they really happen more often in these cells in the distal part than in the proximal part. And that, yeah, as I said, it has a meaning. So it's kind of like, serves to amplify this distal synapse. And then there's a paper from Dan Johnson in, I think, Nature Neuroscience in 2014, where it shows this conversion of high frequency to low frequency rhythms in inputs in the distal dendrite of pyramidal cells. This is the one, like a model one, but like they did some experiments showing you simulate the distal dendrite in gamma, it conveys theta to the soma. So that takes us to the hypothesis that these OLM cells may actually contribute to theta oscillations. As I said, I mean, like also the literature in the ventral hippocampus, because they are just in the ventral and the intermediate with the animal we have. So the literature of theta in the ventral hippocampus is very poor compared to dorsal. But I mean, there is some theta there in the, there's this work of Joshua Gordon that shows that, yeah, the theta in the ventral hippocampus is associated to anxiety and so on, while the dorsal hippocampus is movement theta. Then, I mean, like we check, so can we generate theta by stimulating these neurons? So we anesthetized the mice with ketamine now, use a silicon probe. And I mean, the reason why I use a silicon probe we use a silicon probe like this is because to, the relationship between where is the fiber and where you're recording is hard to go. So we actually use 16 channels really to kind of fish where we're simulating. And when we see, it's like, you simulate this, we put like 16 hertz light. So we actually modulate it with sinusoids to avoid spikes, like this artifactory spikes and so on. And when you do that, very often we have an increase in theta band. I'm not going to call this theta oscillation, but you have an increase in power at the theta band. Here is like a spectrogram to show. And as you see, it's not like in all channels. That probably is because where the fiber was very close to. So like, and then the fiber we put it kind of angled to get just the OLM cell bodies. So yeah, we kind of like saw this increase in theta band, and then if you get the units, like when we do the 16 hertz simulation, and as you see here, I mean the simulation is 60 hertz, but the peaks are not. I mean this is like because I mean so far all these papers that they show a relationship between stimulation, like light stimulation and generation of a rhythm was like Cardin's paper, this. Sylvain Williams' paper, they simulated the frequency that they are looking at, right? What made us very happy is that like we simulate out of this frequency and you get this lower frequency response. And then when you look at units, like if you look at these regular firing units, they kind of phase lock not to the light stimulation, but to this rhythm, to like this theta-like oscillations. While fast spiking interneurons, they don't show much of this, they don't change much the phase lock to the ongoing rhythm. If you do the same with parvalbumin, what's happened is the parvalbumin positive interneurons, they phase lock to the stimulus, and they actually kill the regular spiking. You see here, so this unit is here. The green guy here is one of these regular spiking cells. And during the simulation, I don't see pyramidal cell firing. So I mean, and possibly, I mean, like that kind of go against this window of opportunity idea that you have the basket cell firing and then the gaps where they don't fire, the pyramidal cell would fire. But the thing, like if you get the parvalbumin cremains and you look, I mean, yeah, you have a lot of cells in the pyramidal layer that could be fast spike interneurons, but you also have a lot of cell bodies in the audience, here. So because OLM cells also express parvalbumin. And then you have cell bodies even in the, like this lacunose molecular. You have cell bodies in the stratum radiatum. So it means, I mean, like parvalbumin is not, possibly is not the best, like the parvalbumin cremase that everybody uses, possibly not also the best if you want to just separate the role of fast spike interneurons. Because, I mean, like you get interneurons everywhere. So you get dendritic inhibiting and somatic inhibiting. So you actually just inhibit the whole cell. And if you look at the same, like if you do these records in the PV3, what you see, when you shine the light at 16 hertz, you actually see a global decrease in local field potential. So here, like this dark part. And yeah, like that's like how the bispectral density plots look like. You have a simulation, and then you have actually a global decrease in LFP. I mean, the next step we went to see, yeah, how about in vivo? So we put these mice in a treadmill and do the same thing, and simulate at 16 hertz. This is controlled from depth, so this would be the most dorsal electron, that would be the most ventral. And not in all cases, because I think it's very sensitive to where you put the fiber, it's very sensitive where you record. Because, I mean, like, I don't believe that these cells are a hub or anything. So you simulate them locally, they're going to have a local effect, right? So what we saw in several cases, when we see a response, like some cases we don't see any change. But I think like in 4 out of 10, we saw an increase in theta during the treadmill. So, you know, again, this is the most dorsal, so you can see some kind of theta related to movement. That's the black is the control, right? And far away, it's very little, like in the most ventral electrode. There's not much of this movement-related theta. There is some, but I think there is a decrease across the dorsal ventral axis. And then when you stimulate, we generate theta in these distal electrodes, you see? But we actually kill the theta in the proximal ones. And I mean, if you get this distal electron, it's actually quite robust. If you see the peak here, it's quite robust. It's more than in our anesthetized did. Huh? No, this is like okay. This is more dorsal, and this is the more ventral. The fiber is somewhere here. So the fiber goes angled, and we try the best to keep the same. But yeah, the fiber generally get in the middle part of the shunt. So yeah, this is spectrogram. You see, you simulate here at 16 hertz. Sorry, I mean the definition is bad, but and you get this 8 hertz response here. It's very related to this is a simulation artifact. And this is in the proximal part. Again, this is a simulation artifact, but you don't see much in here. No. But the thing is that, I mean, when you simulate at 16 hertz, they kind of like, if you simulate very strong, that's what we saw in vitro. If you get very strong simulation, they fire, 16 hertz and with several action potential to begin, so with like 100 hertz instantaneous frequency. But if you simulate weakly, with like, not deterministically generate an action potential, they generally get like 8 hertz. After you simulate several times, you get some, distribution at 8 hertz. And that's, I mean, like, that's what might be happening when you do it in vivo. Because, like, when you do optogenetics, people think, optogenetics is magic. So, but the light, I mean, spreads very little. You get, like, after 1 millimeter, you have almost 0 light out of your fiber. So the effect of the light is very local. And so most of the cells are going to be in this range, in this penumbra, where you get just very little light, you don't get deterministic response, and so on. So this is like the coherence between the most dorsal electrode to the most ventral. And there is some coherence at this 8 hertz where the animal is walking. But when you have the light, so here's the light, actually you get rid of this coherence. So you kind of desynchronize dorsal and ventral. I mean, I've been thinking about the mechanism of it. Like what the OLM could be doing is that you have this theta coming from the dorsal, right? The pyramidal cells, they connect, they kind of connect like a domino to other OLMs. And then once you have the dorsal part oscillating theta, then via OLM, the ventral parts start also to synchronize in theta. And then if you impose another rhythm to them, you kind of desynchronize the two networks. Then very recently, a postdoc of ours that I share with a guy in Sweden, we decided to see like what is the behavior relevance rate. And that part is it's actually it's very exciting and it's striking. So what we put here is cat P in the field, and then this is like during control. So the mouse very often doesn't go in the cat P, right? Doesn't like cat P, is afraid of the cat. So you kind of avoid this region where it can smell. But when we turn on the cells, yeah, it's like it almost swims in the cat P. We did the same with elevated plasmase. And also this, when you do tail grab, you simulate the cells, they fight a lot to get out. If you actually inhibit them, we use dreads, also because I mean, as you know, mouse is a very small thing. And putting a fiber plus electrode plus head stage and so on, they call it freely moving, but I mean, the animal's just like, you know, I know how free they move, but yeah, it's, and then, I mean, like, we decided to use dreads, and then the opposite happened. Like, the mouse doesn't even move, just stay there in the corner. I was going to talk, because there is a cutting edge, the last of the presentation, I'm going to talk about the system we're doing to record. But so I'm going to conclude this part. So, I mean, our hypothesis so far, we don't have all the data to claim it, but our hypothesis so far, you have this, you know, jolly happy dorsal hippocampus that, you know, wants to explore and see the world. And then you have this melancholic ventral hippocampus that, you know, like a kind of synchronized to the prefrontal thing. And then when the dorsal hippocampus oscillates, it gains, you know, this oscillation may actually entrain the ventral hippocampus and then desynchronize it from the prefrontal. And then the intrinsic theta generating circuits in the theta hippocampus, in the ventral hippocampus, they are actually the ones that synchronize with the prefrontal. And the reason why you think that when we simulate here, in this case, we actually, I didn't show, there's another strange thing. I didn't have this slide. If we actually have your fiber in the proximal part, we have the opposite of this. When you simulate, you get an increase in the movement theta, and a decrease in this, an increase in movement theta in the distal part too. So it's like it depends on where you put the fiber. So I mean, if we kind of excite, also we get the same with dreads. So if you put dreads, because when you inject the dreads and you get the whole, almost all the OLM cells, when you just inject the dread, the excitatory dread, you do increase this distal theta related to movement. So it kind of, you know, you increase synchronization between dorsal and ventral. I'm sorry that I missed this line here, but I can show after with people that want to. And yeah, that's it for the OLM. So as we were talking a lot about techniques, I'd like to just talk about a little system we are doing to record, like to record both local field potential and also to do voltammetry together in a single head stage. This is developed by a guy that worked with us, George. Yeah, this is just like an example of a voltammetry with electrophysiology that you do to get voltammetry and local field potential. The problem, like when you want to measure dopamine or anything that you want to measure with voltammetry, you generate this like DC pulses to reduce or excite like the substrate you want to. And generally, these pulses they they interfere with your recording signal. So it's very hard for you to measure the things and also record simultaneously. What we are doing, so this would be a basic circuit for voltammetry. So you apply your triangle here in the electrode, then you have this feedback resistor. It's a current to voltage converter, classic one. And if you want to do electrophysiology together, so what people do normally, during the voltammetry pulse, they stop recording. They put like a Xenon diode or something. So you stop recording LFP and do your voltammetry. And what we are trying to do is actually do it simultaneously. This is like a diagram of the circuit. So this would be our electrophysiology signal, and here's the voltammetry signal. And this feeds to 2 channels of an intense chip. So this is like a pre-amplifier that sits in front of it. This is now our first version of a head stage. That's also like because I mean, like, living the third world has some advantages, right? I mean, like, you have to play with what you have. And so this Omenetics connector that everybody uses, I mean, they're still kind of expensive. So this is fun. This connector here, George wants to drop his mobile phone. And like, boom, there's a 40 channel connector here. It's like 30 cents or something. And they're very nice. They look like that ZIF connector from Tucker Davis. So they just like sit like that, and they're very hard to get, and very, you know, if you do a right movement, we have actually a special type of dongle like that. You just put in and out, and without stress, without force. And then, to make things even cheaper, I'm sorry that I don't have a photo of the real system, but what we did instead, so like when you get the internship is a very nice thing that this, I forgot his name, the intern guy there. Yeah. So it's like the chip has everything. So for people that haven't used it, it amplifies the signal, and it do this. It sends everything in a single channel. So if you have 128 channels, you still need just like a pair of wires. And now the digital chip even digitizes the signal. And then what you have after, you need like some form of hardware. What people normally use is the FPGA, some form of hardware for you to do the communication between your computer and your chip. So what we did instead, we used this guy here, the BeagleBone, and this BeagleBone has a real-time processing unit that you can actually do the same as the FPGA. The difference is that the FPGA still costs like $2,000 and so on, and these BeagleBones, they cost like $30. And also because it has like a wireless, what we did to even simplify the connection. So instead of having a rotary joint and so on, we actually have the BeagleBone with a battery and a cable that's kind of rigid that connects the head stage to the BeagleBone, and we just tie the BeagleBone with a nylon string. So when the animal spins, like the BeagleBone spins together. And then you don't need, commutator joint, and then you avoid this mechanical artifacts and so on. And the data is transmitted using normal Wi-Fi. So we can get like 32 channels, and yeah. So we did a little program in LabVIEW to get the data, but we can, I think, George also changed this intense software that comes with the RHD. And yeah, so that's it. The conclusion for the first talk, like the pyramidal cells dendrite, they convert high frequency or any frequency into theta band frequency, and the distal inhibition from OLM cells contributes to theta generation. And yeah, thanks for listening.